What is up guys, Deadset here. In this video I'll go over the spec that I recommend to Season 6 Wizards with the set that you receive for free at the start. Aside from the early game progression build, I'll also go over a endgame viable spec that you can transition into. Let's go. Every new season offers you a one-time opportunity to quickly get a character to decent farming potential through a system called Hedrig's Gifts. The gifts are obtained by completing stages of the season journey, with 3 different achievements, each granting 2 pieces of a predetermined class-specific set. You can view the stages of the season journey at any time by clicking the yellow chapter button in the top right corner of the screen, to the right of the difficulty marker. In this example we're using a Crusader, but this is applicable to every class. Each Hedrig's gift appears as in-game mail, accessible via the mail button in the lower left corner of the screen, next to the chat button. Claiming the gift puts it in your inventory, where you can open it similarly to a bounty cache. The first of Hedrig's gifts is rewarded upon reaching level 70. The second of Hedrig's gifts is rewarded upon killing Izuol, the mini-boss in the Great Span, the area connected to the Silver Spire level 1, on Torment 2 or higher. Note the difference to Season 5, where the required boss was Zoltan Kulle. The third and final of Hedrig's gifts is rewarded upon soloing Greater Rift level 20. If you prefer to gauge your capability to complete it in time, it's roughly equivalent to a Torment 4 Rift. After you open the 3 gifts, you'll have all the necessary pieces to attain the full set bonus. Firstly, I'll talk of the speed farming Torment 10 build that you can use to get into easy Torment 10 farming mode early on in the season. It is very reminiscent of the popular Flashfire Wizard, but requires no crossing of multiple sets, making it easier to itemize for. As usual, to guarantee the quality of the build, the Torment 10 demonstration has been done with reset paragons, no augments on gear, and legendary gems upgraded to the bare minimum of level 25. The power of the speed farming variation comes from the relentless explosive blast spam, augmented by the powers of Wand of Woe, Orb of Infinite Depth, and the slow time amplification from the DMO set. To keep up its costs, you will be spamming Diamond Skin Prism, whose cooldown is effectively negated by Ingion procs. As a minor inconvenience of the playstyle, compared to a Flashfire build for example, is the need to pay attention and drop slow time on top of every engagement. You will use Teleport for active maneuvering, and Storm Armor Scramble passively in the background for its movement speed procs. Lastly, you can use any primary skill of your liking to proc the generator requirement of the Focus and Restraint rings. Spectral Blade is used in the demonstration to minimize switch downtimes with the progression spec. When it comes to skill differences with the progression spec, this explosive blast reliant build completely switches away from its arcane orb focus, replacing it with the resource management powerhouse of Diamond Skin Prism. Achieving permanent uptime through Ingion procs, this utility cooldown will reduce costs of all skills by the impressive 9 arcane power, allowing for the trademark explosive blast spam of Wand of Woe builds. With a Gold Wrap and Boon of the Hoarder combo taking care of protection, you will swap the defensive Ice Armor Crystallize for the reliable movement speed boost of Storm Armor Scramble. Last but not least, the Explosive Blast spam completely negates the benefits of the controlled DPS and progression-oriented Arcane Dynamo passive. Replace it with Evocation to further reduce time between detonations and other important cooldowns. On the topic of speed farm gearing differences, the biggest and most important swap is the weapon. Instead of the high GR powerhouse Unstable Scepter, you'll use the dedicated Explosive Blast legendary Wand of Woe. As a tip to circumvent the rarity of the item, it is recommended that you collect or craft rare level 70 wands, which are called Sovereign Diabolic Wand, in bulk at the blacksmith, and then use the upgrade rare recipe in Kanai's Cube. The Hope of Cain recipe, which is 1 rare item and 50 of white, blue and yellow crafting materials, will only produce legendary wands, cutting down all the other one-handers in the RNG pool that you would otherwise have to deal with through regular gambling at Kadala. Needless to say, Wand of Woe needs to be paired with the dedicated explosive blast source called Orb of Infinite Depth. It is also recommended to swap away from the Endless Walk set, the Compass Rose Ring and Traveler's Pledge Amulet, as this promotes a static fighting playstyle that is unfit for torments. Use the more offensive Focus and Restraint combo instead, ideally paired with a good Hellfire amulet with a synergistic speed farm passive like Glass Cannon. The Shame of Dilzir will step down from the belt slot for the income-based protection of Gold Wrap, supplying practically infinite toughness on a good Boon of the Hoarder gold streak. With your protection taken care of, the final gear ring swap will be the Bracers, switching away from the GR protection of Ancient Partner Defenders into Nemesis Bracers, aiming to get you from one Ingion proc to another quicker by spawning elites at every shrine or pylon. As for legendary gem adjustments, you'll keep Bane of the Trap across both specs for its true damage multiplication. For Torments, you'll replace Stricken with Bane of the Powerful, matching the speedruns with more upfront burst. And finally, you will have to use Boon of the Hoarder to keep up your Gold Wrap toughness. The suggested cube setup is Ingion for the ubiquitous 10-second cut of important cooldowns, Warzekian Arm Guards for the regular destruction-based speed-ups during rifts, although you can stick to Aquila Caress here if you feel like you're taking too much damage early on. And finally, Avarice Band for the pickup radius improvement, making it a breeze to collect gold for Gold Wrap. That about covers it for the early Torment speed farm build. Now onto the progression build you can swap into, an Arcane Orb based bursty spec that can carry you all the way into the 90s. The major offense mechanic of the build lies in the buffed damage values of Arcane Orb, repurposed for close combat with the Arcane Orbit rune and amplified by the DMO set 6-piece bonus. Your defenses rely on the passive armor buff of Ice Armor, the set-induced damage reduction inside slow time, and on the combat-dependent bonuses of Spectral Blade Barrier Blade and Explosive Blast Chain Reaction plus Orb of Infinite Depth combo. Your mobility cooldown teleport should be used offensively and defensively depending on the situation. Sometimes it will close the distance to a fight so you can drop slow time and Halo of Release freezes, and other times it will get you out of dangerous affixes. Do not hesitate to take advantage of the Safe Passage defensive buff, as Illusionist will reset teleport's cooldown multiple times during a fight. Remember to balance periods of stationary fighting for the Endless Walk set damage bonuses with bursts of movement to a fresh fight, as the interaction between Halo of Release and Ancient Partner Defenders depends on the number of frozen enemies, and once you've already frozen, get progressively resistant to it. Spectral Blade will serve multiple purposes in the build. Firstly, it counts towards the DMO set 2-piece requirement, reducing slow time's cooldown by 2 seconds per cast. Secondly, as a signature skill, it falls in the category of the Shame of Dilzir belt, resulting in 50% faster attack speed and up to 12 arcane power per hit, regenerating your AP reserves lightning fast. Thirdly, it will empower your Arcane Orbit with the stacking mechanics of Triumvirate and Arcane Dynamo. Last but not least, it has a defensive function from the Barrier Blades rune, helping you stay alive in the melee spellcasting spec. The basic long-range spender Arcane Orb is transformed into a close combat monstrosity with the Arcane Orbit rune. Affected by the DMO 6-piece damage buff, detonating twice through the power of the new Unstable Scepter, and boosted even further by Triumvirate and Arcane Dynamo stacks, these orbiting Arcane Globes will chew through your enemy's health in seconds. Make a point to recast Arcane Orb at least with a stacked Triumvirate, which means 3 Spectral Blade attacks, but ideally after you fully stack up Arcane Dynamo as well, which is after 5 Spectral Blade attacks. Slow time is integral to DMO setups, amplifying the damage of multiple skills inside its radius, as well as cutting incoming damage in half for you and by a quarter for party members. You augment its damage reducing properties with another 25% from the Exhaustion rune. Slow time has a sizable 15-second cooldown, which you circumvent through the 2-piece set bonus of DMO and your Spectral Blade and Arcane Orb spam. Do not hesitate to spread multiple slow times as the battle demands. They are free to cast, and your damage will be negligible outside their radius. Despite the bonuses it receives from the DMO set, Explosive Blast will be introduced to the build as means of protection rather than damage. You'll be taking the multiple explosions of the Chain Reaction rune, quickly maximizing the damage reduction benefits from Orb of Infinite Depth source, discussed in the cube section. An alternative for the slot is found in the minor source of defense and damage amplifier, Magic Weapon Deflection. In fact, the demonstration is done with it. The long-lasting steroid remains quietly in the background and procs consistently off of spectral blades and arcane orbs. This variation allows you to run the furnace in the cube for a significant damage increase against elites, but limits your overall damage reduction. Deciding between these two variations is up to personal preference, as their performance is extremely comparable. Sometimes immediate repositioning will be required, evading a bad affix, engaging fresh enemies for Ancient Parton Defender procs, or simply to gain a toughness buff without losing maxed Endless Walk bonuses. Teleport will cover you for all these purposes, along with the damage reduction of the Safe Passage rune. For additional protection, we will be using Ice Armor with the massive bulwark of Crystallize. The short reach of the build will inevitably put you in melee brawls, refreshing your Crystallize stacks constantly. The added value from Halo of Release will bring excellent crowd control on top of the mitigation, solidifying Ice Armor as the defensive spell of choice. This concludes the overview of the active skills. Now let us look through the passives. Reworked into a comparable function to other cheat deaths, Unstable Anomaly gives you one shot at dodging a lethal situation, operating on a standard 60-second cooldown and adding a 3-second stun to nearby enemies, plus a solid 400% max life shield for 5 seconds. It will become a constant companion to your Greater Rift pushes. An alternative to this passive is Unwavering Will, synergizing with the static fighting playstyle of the build and adding significant toughness with the 20% armor buff. Another powerful survival tool is hidden in your Illusionist passive, feeding further cooldown reduction into your slow time and turning Teleport from a strategic cooldown into a constantly available asset. The requirement of 15% life taken per hit is calculated prior to mitigation and translates into basically any hit taken in high Greater Rifts. The additional 30% movement speed after using some of the build's core abilities is just icing on the cake. Audacity is a natural inclusion in a melee range spellcasting build like this one, bringing an impressive 30% multiplicative damage increase against enemies within 15 yards. Arcane Dynamo synergizes excellently with a build that already has a signature skill build-up mechanic from Triumvirate, offering the whopping 60% multiplicative increase of your next spender with fully stacked flashes of insight. Arcane Dynamo necessitates a 5 Spectral Blade to 1 Arcane Orb rotation for the build. The build incorporates the complete Dozier's Magnum Opus set, taking all 6 available pieces and opening up the jewelry for the Endless Walk set and its damage multiplication bonuses. Area damage is important for the Arcane Orbit Wizard and is a recommended roll on the DMO gloves, along with crit stats and intelligence, and the DMO shoulders, along with intelligence, vitality, and life percentage. The DMO chest and DMO pants should remain pure toughness slots. The DMO helm and DMO boots can roll Arcane Orb percentage bonus, and it is mandatory to seek the skill bonus at least on the boots. Note that stacking armor benefits you because of the balancing of sources of mitigation, as all resistance is already abundant on an intelligence-based character. Not skipping on any of the 6 available set pieces to obtain the full Dozier's Magnum Opus set bonus allows you to split between offense and defense in the jewelry slots. One of the 2.4 reworks, the Endless Walk set, the Compass Rose Ring and Traveler's Pledge Amulet, adds a unique mechanic that slowly increases your damage by up to 100% if you remain stationary, and drains it away and increases your damage reduction while moving. This is identical to the DMO Arcane Orbit playstyle, which teleports long distances into a favorably dense area, and then transitions into stationary Spectral Blade and Arcane Orb rotation. Your other ring slot will be taken up by the pure damage boost of Convention of Elements, whose rotation of elemental bonuses you'll need to learn, and time to maximize the benefits of the short-lived Arcane proc. The ideal stats are crit chance, crit damage, an open socket, and area damage. The cubed Halo of Release finds a synergistic companion in the Ancient Parton Defenders, whose unique property triggers off freeze effects as well, inexplicably missing from the item tooltip. With the chain triggers of Frost Nova from the ring, diving into massive fights turns from a suicide tactic into a survival tool through the numerous damage reduction procs of the Bracer. An important playstyle tip to remember is to always be on the move, as crowd control on the same monster diminishes with each successive application, so always seek out fresh packs to reduce damage with. Introduced in patch 2.4, the Shame of Delzir belt is an arcane power regeneration powerhouse that speeds up your signature spells by 50% and restores up to 12 arcane power per hit. In the stats, the belt should be dedicated purely to toughness, with a high intelligence, vitality, armor, and life percentage rolls. The mandatory weapon for the build is Unstable Scepter, a 2.4 addition that not only rolls with up to 65% Arcane Orb damage, but also has a unique affix that detonates Arcane Orb twice, effectively doubling your damage output. The ideal stats of the wand are high damage range, intelligence percentage damage, and area damage. Receiving a significant boost in numbers, Triumvirate remains the best in slot source for any Arcane Orb related build. Its unique bonus stacks Arcane Orbit damage by up to 600% at the full 3 stacks, achieved by an easy triple attack from Spectral Blade. Note that if you're using Orb of Infinite Depth variation of the build, this slot is interchangeable between the two sources depending on your better roll. The desired stats are high damage range, intelligence, crit chance, and area damage. Your 3 jewelry sockets will be taken up by the legendary gems Bane of the Trapped, Esoteric Alteration, and Bane of the Stricken. Bane of the Trapped is a potent source of additional damage, as it is its own multiplier in your total damage calculation. The gem procs itself with its level 25 property in melee range, along with the constant Frost Nova triggers from Halo of Release. Esoteric Alteration is the strongest mitigation gem available, and its impact is noticeable in this close-range caster build, improving your elemental resistances with every gem level, and adding an emergency toughness spike through the level 25 property. Esoteric Alteration ensures that enemies will have a hard time bursting you down. Introduced in Season 4, Bane of the Stricken occupies the third and final jewelry socket, building up your damage multiplicatively in prolonged fights, and with a level 25 bonus specifically targeting Rift Guardians. This gem is designed to assist AoE heavy builds in their struggle against single-target high-health enemies. DMO Arcane Orbit Wizards fall neatly in the category, as the usual lack of trash during Guardian fights nullifies the Ancient Partner Defender's protection, and it is in your best interest to get the fight done as quickly as possible. The Kanai's Cube recommendations are as follows: Orb of Infinite Depth or the Furnace for the weapon slot, Aquila Karaz for the armor slot, and Halo of Release for the jewelry slot. The weapon slot can be taken by Orb of Infinite Depth, a wizard offhand designed around DMO's set bonuses, which twists the damage roll of Explosive Blast into a source of additional buffs. These buffs build up every time Explosive Blast hits an enemy, with an end result of 20% multiplicative damage increase and a substantial 60% damage reduction at the maximum 4 Orb of Infinite Depth stacks. Getting these bonuses up as soon as possible dictates the choice of the Chain Reaction rune. If you run the magic weapon variation of the build, you can cube the Furnace, the strongest generic two-handed weapon in the game. With its 50% additional elite damage affix, it speeds up clear times greatly, as Champion and Rift Guardian fights are the usual Greater Rift bottleneck. Aquila Karaz will halve incoming damage as long as Arcane Power does not dip below 90% of its reserve, which is an uncompromising teaching tool on using Spectral Blade and the Shame of Delzir at all times. Be mindful of your spending if you're using the Explosive Blast variation of the build, as it consumes slightly more Arcane Power on a regular basis than the Magic Weapon variation. As a build that regularly stands toe-to-toe with monsters, Halo of Release will occupy the Jewelry Cube slot. Halo of Release will multiply the effectiveness of your ice armor mitigation and provide additional crowd control. As long as the requirements of the ring are met, and they are calculated pre-mitigation, it will release a constant streak of Frost Novas, unhindered by internal cooldowns. The Jewelry Cube slot is interchangeable with Convention of Elements depending on your better rolled item. In the Paragon points, max out movement speed to the 25% cap and spend the rest on intelligence in the core section. Prioritize crit damage, crit chance, and CDR in offense. Armor followed by life percentage and then all resistance in defense. And finally focus on area damage and life per hit in utility. And this is it for the in-depth look at the Explosive Blast and Arcane Orbit Wizard progression in patch 2.41. You can find the full written version linked below in the description, as well as a Google spreadsheet linking to my detailed guides for every build in Diablo 3, of course in the process of revision to patch 2.41. I hope you enjoyed the guide, and if you did, I would appreciate your subscription to my channel. Talk to me on Twitter and Facebook that I linked below, and I'll see you guys next time.